There's a town you won't find on most maps. A quiet hollow surrounded by forest and fog, where autumn never truly ends. They call it Ashvale Hollow, a place caught between breath and silence. At the northern edge of town, a narrow lantern path winds up a low hill, where St. Edda's Chapel stands, a crooked old building that watches the valley like an unblinking eye. Every Halloween night, the people of Ashvale Hollow walk that path, carrying candles and children. They gather inside the chapel to hear a song older than their blood. They call it the Harvest Choir. No one remembers who wrote the hymn or when it began, but everyone knows the rule. You never interrupt the hymn. And if you're wise, you don't ask what happens to the ones who do. Stay close, my dark hearts. The choir's about to begin. For Mar and Doran, Halloween had always meant warmth. The smell of cider on the stove, the creak of porch steps under carved pumpkins, the laughter of her 10-year-old daughter, Elsie, whose voice could make the wind pause to listen. Marin was 33, pale-skinned, chestnut hair always slipping from its braid, eyes a soft grey that had seen too much loss and not enough peace. Her husband had drowned the previous winter when the river froze thin. Since then, the house had felt hollow. But Elsie's singing had filled it again, bright and tender. This year, Elsie had been chosen for the Harvest Choir, an honor the town treated like a blessing. Yet when Maren heard the bell toll 3 times that morning instead of 2, she felt the first chill of unease. That evening, she walked her daughter up the hill. The chapel glowed faintly through fog. Its stained glass caught firelight from within, painting the graves in shifting colors. Inside, the air smelled of wax and damp stone. The children stood in neat rows, robes white as bone, crowns of oak leaves tied around their heads. At the front stood the conductor, a tall woman veiled in black lace, her gown moving like smoke. Her hands, pale and elegant, hovered in the candlelight. When she raised them, every flame bent toward her. The hymn began, slow and precise. The notes slid through the air like threads of silver. Beautiful, but heavy. Each one pressed against Marin's ribs until she struggled to breathe. And then she saw it. The children's shadows clinging motionless to the floor while their bodies swayed in rhythm. The veiled woman turned her head, sensing Marin's stare. Beneath the lace, her lips curved faintly. Each year, she said, voice barely more than breath, a few new voices are added to the hymn. Just enough to keep it alive. The words lodged in Marin's chest long after the candles died. That night, she couldn't sleep. The melody curled through the rafters, like mist, settling in her thoughts. Near midnight, she heard it again, soft humming from Elsie's room. The girl sat upright, hair hanging over her face, eyes half closed, lips moving in perfect rhythm with the song. Moonlight made her skin almost translucent. Marin touched her shoulder. The humming stopped, but the air stayed cold. Elsie opened her eyes, green, bright, but distant, and whispered, "It's almost time. Don't be scared if the lights go out by morning." She was all smiles again, pretending nothing had happened, though her voice now carried a strange maturity, like an echo belonging to someone older. As the next rehearsal began, Marin returned to the chapel, uneasy. Parents whispered by the door, proud yet pale. The hymn rose again. The sound vibrated in the floorboards. One of the younger boys faltered, clutching his chest. His voice cracked, and before anyone could reach him, he collapsed. The others kept singing as if nothing had happened. The choirmistress knelt, one hand covering the child's mouth. His body convulsed once, exhaling a faint golden mist that drifted into her veil. When she lifted her hand, the boy's eyes stared glassy and still. "Heat stroke," she murmured. "The air in here is close." 2 men carried the body away. The hymn never paused. Marin's stomach turned. When she looked around, the other parents avoided her eyes, lips tight, as if the explanation were enough. But she had seen the mist. She was sure of it. She went looking for Tom Halpern, the chapel caretaker, a man built from wood and dust. He sat outside the tavern, sharpening a chisel. When she mentioned the choirmistress, his hands stopped moving. "You saw her take the breath?" he asked. Marin nodded. Tom's gaze drifted to the hill. "She was here when my grandfather was a boy," he said. "Older now, yet the same. There was a sickness once. The fever took half the hollow. A woman came down from the ridge, singing. The fever broke, but the survivors woke grey-haired. She promised life, and she took it by the measure of a breath. They built her chapel to keep her near, thinking gratitude might tame her hunger. But she's never stopped singing." That night, the fog came earlier than usual. It rolled down from the ridge like a tide, drowning lamplight in its path. From her window, Marin saw the candles of the chapel burning through the haze, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. She thought she heard the hymn again, distant, low, almost like someone breathing in her ear. Halloween arrived with a sky the color of old pewter. The townsfolk dressed their children, lit their lanterns, and followed the path up the hill. Marin walked beside Elsie, who carried her robe folded neatly over one arm. "Don't be afraid," Elsie said softly. "It's only a song." The words didn't sound like comfort. They sounded like memory. Inside the chapel, every seat was taken. Wax pooled on the wooden floor. The choirmistress stood at the altar, motionless, until the final bell faded. Then she raised her hands, and the hymn began. It was beautiful, so beautiful that it hurt. The notes vibrated through the walls, through the lungs of every person present. Marin's heartbeat slowed to match its rhythm. Each breath came shorter. The faces around her seemed blurred, drifting like candle smoke. Elsie's voice rang above the others, clear, angelic. Then her mouth opened wider, and a golden light poured out. The glow twisted upward in thin strands toward the altar. The choirmistress lifted her veil. Beneath it, her skin gleamed ivory, her eyes burned gold, and her mouth opened in silent hunger. The light streamed into her like smoke drawn to flame. The children's faces glowed faintly as the parents' skin began to pale. A man near Marin gasped, clutching his throat. His wife tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Across the pews, skin shriveled, lips cracked, eyes sank inward. The air reeked of iron and wax. Marin stumbled forward. "Stop!" she cried. The word dissolved into the music. The choirmistress's gaze found her, bright, endless, and the song surged louder. The wax from the candles ran red down the stands. The sound of the choir became a scream hidden in harmony. The pews creaked as bodies aged in seconds, hair whitening, flesh tightening against bone. Marin looked down at her hands. They were grey, veins black beneath the skin. She turned to Elsie, who sang on, tears streaming as light poured from her throat. The choirmistress stepped down from the altar. Each footfall left a dark print on the floor. She reached for Marin, and the air burned cold around her fingers. "The song chooses its keeper," she said. Her touch seared like frostbite. Marin saw herself reflected in the woman's golden eyes, saw her own face collapsing, flesh sinking, wrinkles carving deep. Her mouth opened to scream, but light burst from it instead. Her body shuddered as something ancient filled her lungs, twisting her spine upright. Her skin split along her collarbones, shedding like thin paper. Beneath it, new skin shimmered pale and perfect. The hymn reached its final verse. The last breath of the congregation escaped in one long sigh. The choirmistress, no, Maren, lifted the veil from the corpse at her feet and placed it over her own face. When the candles dimmed, only she and the children remained. The floor was littered with husks, grey brittle shells slumped in prayer. The wax beneath the altar had turned the color of blood. At dawn, the fog thinned. Villagers climbed the hill, looking for loved ones. Through the cracked doors, they saw rows of figures sitting upright, hands folded, faces hollow, yet strangely peaceful. The children stood behind them, humming softly. When one man called his wife's name, her head tilted, but her eyes were gone, black pits that gleamed faintly from within. The door slammed before anyone could enter. The next moment, every candle inside reignited at once. A year later, the procession returned. The hymn began anew, smooth and sweet as ever. The children sang beneath St. Edda's colored windows, their young faces glowing in the candlelight. And at the altar stood a veiled woman, hands raised, voice perfect. Her gown rippled like smoke. Her eyes burned faintly gold beneath the lace. Her name was Maren Dorin. The harvest always comes for what it's owed. Some years it takes the crop. Some years it takes the choir. But in Ashvale Hollow, it always takes the song. Until then, keep your lights low, your courage high, and meet me in the next story.